Is called the Stimulator. This is a fly that everybody should have in their fly box everywhere that they go, because it can be a hopper imitation, it can be a stonefly imitation, it can be a great fly to use for a dry dropper type situation, because you can float a big old weighted nymph with one of these things in a bigger size. As far as what sizes to tie it in, I would say you can go anywhere from 6s down to 16s. If you're feeling really intrepid, go ahead and tie these in a 16. That'll be fun for you. You could probably even go to a 4 or something like that if it's hopper season. So I've gone ahead, put the hook in the vise, I pinched down the barb already, and I'm going to go ahead and tie my thread in right behind the eye. And this hook is a 200R hook. Tiemco kind of created a monopoly for themselves almost with this hook. It's just got a great curve shape to it. It's a 3x long hook, and I'm going to take this just a little bit past the hook point so you can see that I'm already into the bend of the hook just a little bit. Now, out of that elk hair that was left, I'm going to take about 1/3 of that, 1/4 to 1/3, about that much, okay, and clean out all the stuff. And then put it in the stacker. And then I'm going to pull this out. Now the tail on this should be relatively short, a little bit longer than the distance of the gap of the hook, but you can see I'm not putting a big long tail on this, okay? And the other thing is that it should be relatively bushy. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've got this the length that I want it. And I'm going to go ahead and do a relatively firm but not super tight pinch wrap. And then I'm starting to just gradually make my way forward with a little bit of thread tension, and then just kind of cinching it down as I go. And then once I get that started to go up the hook, then I'm going to come in with the scissors and I'm going to cut this at a taper so that the taper stops just slightly past halfway up the hook. Right about like that. Can everybody see that okay? Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and, starting with some looser wraps at first just to kind of corral everything, and then with some tighter turns, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bind that all down pretty tightly. Okay. Now, this is another fly where there are infinite number of color combinations. I have seen what is called the original Stimulator have a tan or yellow abdomen with orange dubbing up in the front. I have seen orange in the abdomen with tan or yellow up at the front. There is a Royal Stimulator which has peacock herl and red floss in the abdomen, just like a Royal Coachman. You can do it in all of whatever color you want to do, and the same thing as far as hackles go. Usually with hackles, the brown and the grizzly are probably the most common, but if you're going to tie a, let's say there's hoppers out there that are sort of a, a slate or an olive type of thing, I wouldn't hesitate to do this with an olive abdomen and then a blue dun or a grizzly hackle or a brown hackle. So don't feel like you have to stick to this one color combination. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the grizzly hackle, and just like we did.
Again, the hackles on this are like the hook gap or a little bit more?
Just a little bit more than the hook gap. So I'm just going to kind of bind that in to the hook. And then I'm going to come back. And we're going to do this with an orange abdomen and the tan head. So I'm going to go ahead and
down in front, can you do it? Cheap seats here.
now this stuff here is called Hairtron, which is a blend between Antron fibers and hare's ear. Doesn't necessarily have to be Hairtron to tie this, but it does work well. So now I've got the orange on here, and now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to bring that forward, and I've run out, so I'll get a little more.
Pretty thick.
Not tremendously so, just medium. I just, again, because you're already getting, when you're buying down the elk hair wing or tail, that already fattens up the body a fair amount. And what I don't want is I don't want to go too far forward. That's going to be the natural inclination here, is to take that too far forward. So you can see I'm leaving that back, you know, about at least a third to maybe even a little bit more back there. Now I'm going to take the hackle and I'm going to palmer this forward. Tie that off. And trim it.
You went all the way forward, or just
no,
back
just to cover the orange.
Okay.
And is that dub just an even dub?
Just an even level, but you'll notice what happened was as I came forward towards the end of where I tied in, where the elk hair ended, it sort of tapered down a little bit. Okay, that's fine because we're going to hide that with this next step. Now I'm going to take, well, I can't take the rest of the elk hair because it's too much. But I'm going to take a little bit bigger clump of elk hair than I used for the tail, and I'm going to stack it. This is one of the few times, for most cases, I think I've said this before, I'm not a huge fan of using a stacker because typically wings and things in nature do not have a perfectly straight edge to them. The one or a couple of exceptions to that are caddis wings and something where if you're going to imitate what could be the body or the extension of a hopper, then that can have a little bit more of a blunt end to it. I'm going to go ahead and line up this wing, and I want the wing to come to about halfway down the tail on this. Now once I've got that measured off, got a couple of shortest fibers in there, get those out. Once I've got that measured off, I'm going to go ahead and mark it, and then I'm going to cut it at a little bit of a taper right in front of that area where I marked it off. So that now, and this is where it gets tricky.
Yeah, especially with your head in the way of the camera.
Okay. I'm going to bring the thread up, and I'm going to cut that. I grabbed about the bottom third of that. Then I've gone ahead and put the next turn in, and the next. Actually, that last turn is probably going to be too much material.
How close to the eye are you right there?
I'm still well back from the eye. Okay. And so now I'm just going to go ahead and start binding all that down. I would recommend to you guys to not use as much elk hair as I just used on this. That's going to be an awfully full dressing, but now I'm just going to go in and smooth that out. And if there's a couple of especially long pieces, I'm not going to sweat it too much because we're going to put dubbing over the front here.
Now, Chuck, the way that you layered that, does that make the hair stand up a certain way?
Well, what I wanted to do is I want the whole thing to just kind of flow back. See how the wing just sort of flows back? So kind of just to almost follow the curvature and the shape of the hook.
Okay.
Now that I've got that in place, I'm going to go ahead, and we're really just repeating the process, but this time we're going to use the brown hackle.
Do you sometimes use the same hackle up front, or do you always mix it up on this one?
You could. Okay. So wind that
outside of the hackle facing you?
Yes. And then I'm going to take, somehow my tan stuff disappeared, so take a little bit of tan. You're not going to need much here because you can see how much thread has already gotten built up. You've already got a good sized head there. And so I've got that dubbed on. And now I'm going to wind that back, and I'm going to make sure that I'm actually going to even turn this upside down, make sure that there's no bare thread spots showing underneath. And then I'm just going to take that down. Bring that down to right behind the eye. Maybe give yourself just a little bit of room. Okay. Then same thing. Bring that hackle feather up so it's perpendicular to the hook. And then using your hackle pliers or your fingers, whatever you're most comfortable with, go ahead and palmer that forward.
What size is that hackle in the front?
You want it to be just a little bit bigger than the the turns on this are not exactly even. The hackle should be just about the same size or maybe just a little bit bigger than the hackle on the abdomen. Okay?
So a little bit more than the hook gap.
Yes. And this hackle is actually probably, actually no, it's just about the right size. So you try to get ideally 3 to 4 turns on that. Trim away the excess. And then if there are any other stray fibers, get rid of those. Whip finish. Can you borrow your hardest hole again? And one other thing that I didn't do, but you certainly could, is each time you tie in some of the elk hair, if you want to put a thin bit of glue on there, wouldn't be the worst thing ever. And then you're done.
Do some of these stimulators have little the legs, the rubber legs?
They'll call them like a super stimulator, or
What size was this one?
this was a size 8, and I've got size 8 hooks.